All right, welcome everybody to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen. This is sponsored by Seller Labs, the number one tool for brand new Amazon sellers to get started. I'm here to tell you and invite so these two individuals, if you've been following my social feeds, I was just on their podcast a little while ago. We hit the stop record button and we were like, wait a second, you got to come on my podcast. These are old friends of mine. I'm going to let them both introduce themselves. But Dave Newell and Hannah Pniewski, and Hannah has a new last name that I've seen bouncing around. No, you're
No.
keeping Pniewski. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I apologize. Hannah just recently got married.
Engaged.
I keep
I'm
track of
sorry to
things.
keep correcting you, but
Wait
yeah.
a second. Hold
We can
on. Did
edit
I get
this,
an
right?
invite? Maybe did I get a wedding invite or something? And I'm like forgetting all of the things. So, Hannah, welcome. How soon do you get married? How soon is that happening?
We're getting married in May. The funny joke here is that my last name is Pniewski. My parents always said it would be really funny if they got married to a Smith. I am getting married to a Smith, but I'm not changing my last name.
I remember Hannah and I worked together for a long time, and I mispronounced her last name for like 3 months or something. It was quite difficult. All
It
right,
happens.
so as we open up this episode, my opening question on every episode is the same. Why would an e-commerce seller who's looking to diversify their portfolio, who's looking to shift and maybe consider doing some consulting or knowledge work or some sort of other non-tangible, right? We're not talking about back scratchers here. We're not talking about monetizing that, a
Mhm.
physical product. We're talking about the mental capital that's inside. So we're going to let Hannah answer first, and then Dave. Why would an e-commerce seller looking to diversify their mental capital be interested in hearing from you?
It's a great question, and I'm very excited to hear Dave's answer too, but I'll jump in. I will leap, as we like to say at Evolve. Yes, so my journey is pretty windy, but I'll say I'll answer the question first and then I'll expand upon it. I think they would want to hear from me because I think that I took the three things that I'm really good at and now I use that to work for Evolve to be a valuable member of my team. I think one, I am really good at creating order out of chaos. I like asking questions to understand what is chaotic, what is the mess, tell me about it, and then helping you create a process, a series of events to comb out the knots and create order out of that chaos. But it is a thing that my brain does, and I don't have an app built for it. So I'm proud of my brain for that. Two, I think I'm really good with people and being empathetic and listening to the struggles that the people that I work with go through. I think Will definitely saw this as well. I was his VA for a while, and I think that all that pressure on his shoulders, like, I liked being a help to him. I liked hearing, like, what are you dealing with today? What are your challenges? How can I take those off your plate? And so now, as a coach, I get to do that for people just like Will and help them, again, tease out those knots. How can we find order in the chaos? And also, how can you give yourself some grace to be able to deal with all the pressures and just let me help you carry that load, if only for a coaching conversation, and then we'll introduce you back into the world, at least feeling a little lighter. So I think that would be the second thing. And then I think the third thing would be a marriage of the two. I do think that I have a good mental ability to understand what does leadership need, i.e. process, and then what do and understanding and support. And then what do the doers, as I like to call them, the people who are being managed need? And they also need process and empathy. And so I think I'm really good at marrying those two sides of a company so that everyone feels
Mm,
heard, supported, and they exit their time working with me with definitely more unity between the two sides, leadership and the doers, but also like a repeatable process, and maybe a better way of communicating. So I think that's how I have used my mental capital and how I do use my mental capital to help our clients.
cool. Awesome. Dave.
Can you rephrase the question for me? I got into Hannah's answer and then I was like, wait,
Wait,
what
what
was,
was the question? Yes,
yeah,
I'll throw it out there
I
again.
was
Why
trying
would
to
an
be very
e-commerce
present to
seller,
what she was saying. Yeah.
you're good. why would an e-commerce seller who's interested in monetizing their mental capital, diversifying their portfolio, going from mental nugget to I just monetized that, why would they be interested in hearing from you, Dave?
I don't think that dissimilar from Hannah. And actually, we actually just went through a coaching process with an e-commerce seller who sold their business and was like, "Hey, I've got some things to offer from a mental perspective. I know some stuff, right?" And so, how do you take this expertise in e-commerce, which is from inventory management to pricing structures to go-to-market strategies to platform management? It's a very complex soup of how all of that works. And when you know it, you know it. And when you're good at it, you're really good at it. And so working, hearing from us is essentially like, hey, we can help you make sense of even the own chaos that you managed and compartmentalize that and put that into a structure and an organization that's knowable and repeatable that you can help other e-commerce sellers take on. Right. So similar to Hannah, my brain thinks in systems and structure. You give me chaos and I'll give you compartmentalized action items. Here's how it fits, right? So here's how you structure it, here's how you scale it, and then here's how you sell it. Here's the story that you can tell to somebody. And so on the e-commerce side, we've probably had 6 or 7 e-commerce clients in the last 2 years. And I have a lot of admiration for that group because it is just a never-ending shifting environment where like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
Amazon decided to add fees today. Oh, interesting. Oh, they shut down our listing and didn't tell anybody. Great. It's just you're so used to just dealing with the fire that you've learned so many skills along the way. Sometimes it's helpful just to have somebody pull those skills out of you and make sense of it, right? Is to say, hey, I see you, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, and here's how you can put that into a framework that you could apply to other environments.
Love it. So next question for the two of you. We're gonna go Hannah and then Dave again.
Okay.
Tell me the first time you can remember monetizing mental capital. And I have heard
Ooh.
everything from I sold drugs in high school to
Is that
I've heard
mental
everything from
capital?
that to like, I used to crack video games and sell them online to I did a lemonade stand. I've heard everything you can imagine for the answer to this question. So go way back, think early, and an anecdote that you guys will both enjoy. Alex, my daughter, is now 10 years old.
Stop it.
It is true. She is 10 years old.
Gosh,
No.
double digits.
Her favorite thing to do right now is, well, one of her favorite things to do is to go to the corner up above our house, and she throws up a lemonade stand. And I kid you not, she makes almost $85 every time she does,
My kind of
because
girl.
some person in the neighborhood will come by and buy. They'll hand them a $20 bill, and she'll be like, "I don't have change for that," and they'll be like, "I don't care. Here's my glass of lemonade." And like she's consistently pulled more than $50 a day out of that thing, and she's probably done it 10, 15 times.
Amazing.
She so much so that I could go on and on about her little entrepreneurial spirit. It's pretty fun.
That's
Um,
awesome.
that will be, I'm sure, one of the stories she tells about monetizing her mental capital, because they're definitely
Mhm.
not buying lemonade, they're buying charm.
Sure,
And
sure.
she is charming the bejeebers out of the neighborhood, um, and smiling and being very cute. So I'm curious, when's the first time you can remember monetizing your mental capital?
Well, in high school, I sold drugs. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, oh wow,
I
this
was
is
like,
going to
wait,
be a
what?
new conversation.
I did not see that coming.
No, no. So the first thing that came to mind was, so before I worked with Will, I was producing short form content, commercials, in-house industrials, that kind of thing. And that work is very inconsistent. And so I was trying to figure out, well, what can I do that's a little more consistent, or how can I make some cash to, make ends meet? And I watched a bunch of videos on YouTube that said, think about what can you teach? What do you know that you can teach to someone else? And the first thing that like came to mind was like, oh, well, I can teach someone how to make a short film. I could teach someone how to like produce commercial, in-house industrial, that kind of thing. So I started telling friends that basically I would coach people for their short film, how to do it, to take it from script to having the thing done and mastered and music put to it and submitting to a festival. And I would charge people basically a consulting fee for $150. We got coffee a couple times and I would walk you through the whole process. And I loved it. It was really fun. It was hard to find clients because low budget filmmakers don't have a lot of money. So that didn't last very long, but because then I think we started working together and now I have my 40-hour work weeks, which is a little different. But so I think that was the first time that I monetized my mental capital.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a good one. I vividly I can literally remember exactly the moment that I sold the first thing I ever sold. That was mine. That wasn't like I was in a job when I first got out of college. I was selling other people's stuff, but the it was 2012, and I was at a conference, and I was in this workshopy conference, and I was sitting there, and I was talking to this lady who was sitting next to me, and I still know her very well. We're still connected, and she was talking about this issue that she had. She was like, leading a thing for a county, and they were trying to do like an initiative in the county. And I just started talking about, well, it's interesting because here's how I would think about the problem, et cetera. And she's like, well, would you ever like come and I would pay you? What do you charge? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I've never done that, but I don't know. What should I charge? What makes sense? And I was totally caught off guard. So like, I wasn't even trying to sell the thing, and I sold the thing. And so she was our first client ever, or my first client ever, I guess, that I sold, and that was the catalyst to then hundreds since then of conversations like that and going down that way. So the accidental sale turned into probably the rest of our lives doing that kind of work.
I think it's interesting because many times the way you discover a monetizable nugget of mental capital is literally by people asking you for it. And they're like, wait, oh, I know somebody that knows how to do short films. And oh, I don't know if she just tell you or if she charges something, but you should talk to Hannah. Oh,
Yeah.
I know somebody who does. And there's this natural word of mouth. We like to help people help themselves.
Mm.
And I think one of the things that I want to share on this episode is a tool that I was taught recently about how to advertise your mental nuggets.
Mm.
And it works especially well with fractionals. I've used it a lot for my own business. And it's built into this networking play. The nugget that I've seen used over and over again is called an impact story. And an impact story is literally just tell them all about the pain and then all about the gain that you created for your client. And we naturally, as human beings, share impact stories with each other. This is part of our human existence in connecting these dots. It's how a lot of people find out. So, Hannah, if you think back to a couple of people who did pay you to do the $150 session and let's get coffee a couple times and go out of that, how do they find out about you?
Through friends. Oh yeah, she's made some short films or she produces, talk to her. 100% just through word of mouth.
So, Dave, I don't know if you can remember, but the way I found you to hire you as my fractional COO was through impact stories. You had done work for someone else who was a friend of mine or a friend of a friend of a friend, and he knew that you did that kind of work, and he was like, well, data automation's killing you. You probably need to call a fractional COO. I was like, a fractional? What the fetch is that? And he was like, this guy, and you should reach out to him. I'll make an intro. And I was like, please make an intro.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say that's probably 90% of our revenue in any given year is from impact stories, right? In the space that we're in the consulting, coaching space, so much of it is reputation, credibility, and connection based, right? So how do you build credibility and reputation? You make impact, right? You have to do the work and you have to tell the story and you have to ask, you have to say, when we do that all the time, we refer people all the time. So part of it's actually a partnership game in some ways, right? You and I will have referred each other multiple times and we continue to do that and we'll continue to do that. And we have other partners that's like, hey, you're doing really good work for us, or you did really good work for this client that we're now working with. Like, hey, maybe we should figure out how we can help each other find the next gig and find those next things. But if you're not doing very good work and you're not actually impacting lives and you're not doing a whole lot of impact, it's pretty hard to tell an impact story, right? The other side of that coin is
Go make some impact.
and do a good job.
The
And
other
I
thing that
think,
comes, oh,
go
sorry,
ahead, go ahead. No, go for it. Go for it, Hannah.
Well, so the other thing that comes to mind is like, you think about everybody on YouTube who is like making money off of YouTube ads, yes, but they are also just sharing their impact stories. They're sharing their authority in order to then get clients. I'm trying really hard to be as financially intelligent and literate as I can and grow wealth and things like that. So I'm watching all these really great YouTubers that I really respect, and they talk about, well, this is how I would do this or how I would do that. And then if you want my coaching services, sign up here. So like, for these e-commerce sellers that are listening to your podcast, I would say, as long as you start sharing the knowledge that you have and sharing the moments when you solved something or you fixed something or you helped someone else, then people will know your story and then they'll think of you. It's like you spread your reputation from yourself, either through being on YouTube or through networking or however, but then it'll come back to you because people will think of you that way.
Well, and sometimes I think too for e-commerce sellers, you're so good at putting out fires and you're so good at like
Yes.
navigating things that you might not even know that what you do has expertise to it.
Yes.
Mm,
So sometimes it's interesting because where I thought you were going to take that question of when was the first time you actually sold your mental capital, part of my story in that is like I didn't even know I had it. I didn't even know that that was like an expert opinion or a particular unique way of thinking about things until I said it and somebody was like, "Hey, would you ever do that for us?" And I was like, "Oh, that's actually valuable to you? That's just how I do things, right? Like that's just how I think about things." So I didn't even think about it as mental capital in that way or expertise or something that I knew that other people didn't know or that I could lend a hand with. And as soon as I did, I was like, oh, this is something that we could repeat. So if you think about that from an e-commerce perspective, like if you're really good at pricing and managing inventory and moving inventory and handling third-party logistics and warehousing and all these different things that you can get into, there's
hmm
so much expertise that other people are dying from. Man, if somebody could just solve this problem for us, if you've figured out a way to solve a problem, that is absolutely a thing you can monetize. But I often think we undervalue what we think and what we know of
What we
like
figured out.
everybody knows that. No, they don't. There's a
Mm-mm.
lot of people that don't know that that would actually really
Mm-mm.
benefit from that knowledge. It's it's kind of that discovery, but then also believing the
Mhm.
fact that you have something to share that's valuable. Is it for everybody? Unlikely, right? But it's for
It,
enough.
it's interesting that you mention it that way. And as we talk about this, my brain's going back to all the different times that I have had different opportunities to talk about different things, or when we create new products, and a lot of the time the reason that new product got created is because I was talking to somebody and I was just sharing what we've been working on, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, wait, do you do that for other people?" Right? And I think that goes to show that if I were in the shoes of one of those e-commerce sellers trying to diversify, one of the things that I would start doing is talking about my successes and impact. Just talk about the
Mm-hmm.
pains. You might start a podcast where you talk about, oh, there was this pain the other day and we figured this out, and then get on in 2 weeks and talk about how you solved it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think just talking about some of those different sides and getting it out there into the world.
Yeah.
One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is every single thing that's put on YouTube and Spotify and a lot of these other places, we're getting to a point where the spoken word and the written word are no longer as separate as they once were.
Mhm.
So video content is bridging into
Yeah.
text content
And audio.
rapidly, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think even just literally opening up a podcast, or opening up a YouTube channel and just holding up your phone in front of you and talking about the challenges you're facing and recording a second video that says how you solved it 2 weeks later. If you just started publishing that and just frankly talking about it, I bet you would walk away. Not the one thing you would do is when your buddy says, "Wait a second, how did you get that negative review removed?" off of Amazon, you'd be like, go check out my YouTube channel.
And also just the point of people knowing what you do. My family for the longest time was like, what are you doing again? People don't talk about, especially in their personal lives or when you're like at your kid's softball game with the other parents, they don't talk about what you do. But if you were to share it, oh, I had a really hard thing at work today. I had to really help somebody who works for me and get them out of a rut or whatever. If you just share it from a very humanistic perspective of this is what I was struggling with, but this is how I overcame it, and you get used to that, you'll share your work and what you're capable of more and more often. I do think that we don't know what we are capable of. We are not as we don't realize our own power, but I think we also sometimes don't want to take up space and just share what's really going on. How many times people ask, "How are you doing?" People say, "Fine." Man, I don't want anybody to tell me that they're just fine ever again. I want you to tell me something. You know what I mean? Like,
How
if you
you
figure
really
out
are.
just a way to share it, I think it's
How
good.
you do feel. Well, and I think too I think being able to share that story, or I was just thinking back, I think a lot of my clients have actually come from kids' sporting events because the parents are on the team. We just get to chatting about whatever and we're talking about stuff. But I also think it actually is interesting, right? Like, I actually like it when people share things, but I think we also at times undervalue what we do, or we undervalue the expertise that we hold. Or we hold it a little too close to the chest, which is like, but it's kind of like my expertise and it's kind of my knowledge, and you don't get to have it. And it's like, well, that is just a total turnoff for whoever you're talking to, right? So there is a little bit of an art form to what do you give away and what do you hold on to, and how much is too much?
Mm.
How
Totally.
much how much expertise do I give you before you want it? And then how do I get you to make the decision that you want it? Right? So Will, what I heard in your impact story piece is the impact story shows like, here's what was going on and here's what we did, but you didn't tell me how. You
Mm-hmm.
told me what you did.
Yep.
Right. You told me like what it ended up in. And now as the listener, I'm like, well, that sounds pretty good. That sounds better than what I got. And it's getting me to the question, how do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the hunger space. I want you to be hungry when I'm done talking to you about, oh yeah, how I would do that. I want to do that. That'd be great. How do I do that? Great. Here's how you do that. Now I've got a thing for you over here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to recognize that so the basic anatomy of an impact story is one, describe the pain in grand detail, as deeply as you are willing to go. I was experiencing this and my client did this, or my entire e-commerce business came to a standstill because of the suspension, or whatever it was. Describe the pain. And I missed out on kids' baseball practices, and describe the pain, describe the pain. And what you're doing is you're creating, going back to short film and all of the above, a hero's journey.
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
creating an opportunity for a story arc to happen and connect those dots. Well, it's funny because in movies, when they go to the montage, when now it's the Karate Kid and he's like, wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off. And what you didn't see is that he did it 4,000 times before he actually got good at wax on, wax off. That part is a lot the how. And people actually don't care too much to know about the how until they really feel the pain for what's there, and you can show them here's the results, right? The part we love watching in movies is
Yeah.
the introduction of the pain. Then we get this fast montage where all the fast how-to stuff, and then we go to the climax where it's boom, resolve, results, right? This is where that all comes together. And so I think to your point, Dave, you don't need to give away the farm and tell everybody exactly how. Just share the results, and that will create that hunger and that desire, and people reach back out to you. And for me,
100%.
the way I build it, my challenge to myself is to have at least 4 connect calls each week in my knowledge based business. And the way that I run the business is a connect call is I told an impact story, and then at the end of the call, I asked for a referral. And the way that I ask for that referral is very, very genuine. I simply say something like, do you know anybody else, insert pain I talked about during the impact story, who might be feeling that? I would love to help them if you do.
Mm.
The person has the opportunity to be like, and when they're going, shut up, don't say anything. Just let them think. They really are combing their Rolodex right now. And you inserting yourself stops the Rolodex search, and you don't get a referral. So just
Because then you make that person the hero for giving the referral. Oh, I got a guy, he can help you.
yes, yes. So you just wait and you
Yeah.
wait. And
Yeah.
eventually they'll be like, nobody's coming to mind right now, but bug me in a month and I think I might know somebody. Go into your calendar, schedule a reminder, reach out in a month. So my
Yeah.
experience is if that individual you're talking to happens to be a potential client, they'll say something like, you know what? I actually probably am feeling that pain. And you'll say, fantastic. Why don't we have another call about that?
Mm.
Right.
For sure.
So
Well, and
go for it.
everything you're saying is reminding me of another mental capital that I did not bring up at the beginning, but being an e-commerce seller, 100% you know systems. You have some kind of knowledge of some kind of system that you have used to productize the product. And I now am a ClickUp certified expert. So I am, or a ClickUp verified consultant. So one of the biggest part of my week is helping our clients optimize their use of ClickUp. And they would rather just email me and say, hey, how do I do this thing? Than go to YouTube and search for it themselves. And so
Mhm.
I know those things, so I can help them. It's the same thing with ShipStation, Shopify, whatever you're talking about. E-commerce sellers have so much of that knowledge that they can easily share and help somebody with a shortcut if they know how to share those impact stories and they know how to communicate that like, this is what I know and this is how I can help.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
So this is we've got two more questions that we like to ask on all of our episodes.
Okay.
This is one of my favorites. So Dave, you're going to think back to you're sitting at that conference and this guy in a dark suit with glasses walks up and hands you a phone. And the phone is actually a link to Dave Now.
Mm.
So the guy disappears and you're like, how the crap am I talking to myself in the future? This is insane. Would make a great movie. So
Maybe a short film.
maybe a short film. So it's time travel. It's been done a few times.
What?
So Dave, my question for you is this. If you could tell him, Dave, who really didn't know how to price that first thing,
Mm.
oh crap, I could actually probably sell this. If you could tell him one thing that he's actually mature enough to absorb that information, what would be the one thing you would tell him?
About that specific sales conversation, I would say,
I would say just in general about his journey monetizing mental capital. What's one thing you would tell him
uh,
that might help him upskill things? I'm curious. You got to tell me now.
I
What
would.
what what would you say in that conversation? You got to tell me about that now. About that
Oh,
conversation,
understand
what would you
anchoring.
tell him?
I would say, here's what anchoring is. Say the number first, and say it higher than you think, and then pause for a minute. Don't say anything, and then say, and how does that land? Or does that resonate? Does that number resonate? Is a really good question.
Okay,
Because
say
I
that one
probably
more
would have
time
gotten
because
more
your
money out of
audio
that
went
deal had
blah
I
blah blah
known
blah.
that trick. Instead, I took. Oh, sorry. The I would talk about anchoring. I would say, so say the number first and say it higher than you think and just let it sit for a second. Right? So, well, how much do you charge for that? Well, I typically charge $3,500 for a workshop, or I typically charge $5,000 for a workshop. And then I'm just going to sit in that for a second, as opposed to like, I don't know, how much do you have? Right? Or like, I don't know, what does it normally cost? I want to come as a position of strength in that conversation. So be thinking about what's your position of strength in that conversation and come from there.
I like
That
it.
would have been my advice in that absolute moment. I would say I would say the generalized advice would be to know to get clear about the pain, to get clear about what impact actually looks like. And then the last piece would essentially be, and then get really clear about what your actual pathway is. So, all the way back to that first question of like, why would somebody talk to us? More often than not, people that are really talented and really good at things are really good at things in isolation. They know that they're good at it, but what they haven't
Mm.
done is string it together into some kind of formula. And it took me a really long time, probably too long, to figure out like, oh, actually, if I just put all these pieces together on our side, here's the framework, here's the formula, and I can know that and I can repeat that. It took me
So,
too long.
Dave, I just got off the phone. Oh, I think it was a week and a half ago, with one of my clients who I introduced to you. And he was like, "Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
the five facets. I think that is the most brilliant." And I was like, "Five facets? That's a Dave thing. did I introduce you to Dave? And he was like, oh, I love Dave. He's the freaking coolest dude I've ever met in my life. And I was like, well, John, I appreciate that. I agree. Dave's a really cool guy. That's your formula, right? The 5 facets.
5 facets is the formula, and John is great. I really like John. To reciprocate, he's been a huge advocate and asset for us so far. The 5 facets took us. It's always been there, right? I've been doing really similar things for a long time. What I didn't do is put it into a named, repeatable, knowable
Oh, I
formula. It probably
remember
took
when
three.
when I asked you what's this named repeatable thing you do, and you said, "Oh, it's kicks between EOS and some of my own juju." I was like, I'm just gonna I just make up. We do
What does that
stuff.
even mean? What does that even mean, right? So it took us a while to get to, and maybe it was the personal side of that. Excuse me, the personal side of that is it maybe took me a while to believe the fact that I had the mental capital to do that, right? To actually
Mm.
claim and own that space, as opposed to like, well, some of these are other people's ideas and some of this is whatever. But I actually think people like us are much more cultivators than we are creators. Actually, what we've done really well is we've taken ideas from 75 different people and we put it into a framework and a formula and some of our own learning, of course, and we put it into a framework and a formula that other people can understand. Right. And I think it took me a long time to maybe admit to myself that that was something that we could do and that we could put it into the world and that we could own that space as opposed to we have our own stuff, but we also do other people's things.
Dave, I almost wonder, reading EOS,
Hmm.
reading Get a Grip, the business book that they
Yeah.
put out, the fable. He opens it up by saying, now, many of these ideas have existed before us. In fact, we've taken from many of the greats, and he includes talking about all those greats. And here's our tried and true system. So I
Yeah.
think you may be underselling yourself a little bit there, my friend, because even the founders of Traction and EOS, which is now
Yeah.
a worldwide movement, and lots of businesses are using it to organize. Give us another couple of years, and the 5 facets will be that worldwide movement that we're hearing about and connecting those dots. And Dave didn't cultivate; Dave created, just like they did. So don't undersell yourself there. I think
Fair.
your nugget you just gave to your much younger self of, look, dude, you're smart enough to put out a formula. Do that sooner. I would
Yeah.
say you have gone beyond cultivator, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. It's the new form of creation, right? Which is how do I take this idea and make it a new one, right? Or put these pieces together. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Love it. All right, Hannah,
Yeah.
if you could make a phone call to yourself, she
Perfect.
just got an invite to go do one of these $150 info sessions,
Woohoo.
and you got done and you were like, man, I did not get paid enough for that. But they're poor filmmakers, and that's hard. Um, what would you tell her? What piece of advice would you give her to maybe help her upskill or up level or accelerate her mental capitalization opportunities?
At the risk of monologuing, because there would be a lot that I would probably tell her. I think the biggest thing is you already have so much value in your brain. You just need to know how to tell the story to get someone else to understand how much value you have. And it's not proving yourself. It's what we're saying on this call. It's knowing how to share instances when you've fixed things, instances where you've made impact, and then letting the other person come to you. Um, so I think it is just really knowing that you already have so much more power and knowledge than you think you do. And I would also turn this into a bit of a process answer, if I may. You just need a process, really. One thing that the journey I've really been going on the last 2 years is figuring out my own process for my own service at Evolve. Knowing how to like break that all down and give that to someone in a proposal and say, this is what we typically do, but we can customize it. And I would offer this to your listeners as part of the answer to this question that when you first start out monetizing your mental capital, it's going to be really messy. You're going to offer this impact story and you're going to do a custom solution every time. But eventually you'll find your process through trial and error. Eventually you'll see, well, this is how I keep the guardrails on a scope of work because I know this is what I need to truly offer. So you just give yourself time, learn from every engagement that you have, and then eventually a process will sort of emerge. And if it doesn't, you can always bring in someone like myself or other, process inclined folks to help you create a service that has a process behind it.
Did
So that it's
anybody else just hear that impact story? Mic drop. Well done there, Hannah. Well done dropping an impact story. I love it. That is a fantastic way to round out our episode. We have one last question.
Okay.
And we're going to rapid fire this one. Tips, tricks, hacks, or books you've come across in the last year that have helped you upscale monetizing your mental capital. So this could be anything from leadership books to pricing books to whatever you've come across. Tips, tricks, hacks, or books you've come across in the last year that have helped you upscale your ability to monetize your mental capital.
I'll actually go ahead and jump in and say we both have read The Working Genius this year. And I think that is a great book for quickly and easily assessing who on your team is good at what. Because not everybody has to be good at the same thing, but how do you monetize or, leverage the strengths of people on your team? So I love The Working Genius.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
The Working Genius, Six Working Geniuses was introduced to me late last year or early this year, and I ate the freaking thing up. Such a cool book. Made my wife take it. We adjusted a bunch of our daily chores around it. She has tenacity. I have invention, and what I didn't know is that I have galvanizing. I didn't realize that galvanizing was a genius of mine, which other people have been like, duh, like that was obvious. Will, I thought it was wonder. I was all about being wonder and invention. But fascinating book. Couldn't agree more. Dave.
Yep. Man, there's lots of different things I could point to. I think we're pretty avid on the reading thing, but I would say the book for me this year has been 10x versus 2x is probably the book I would point out the most, in part because there's a pretty big mental shift in that book that really struck me, especially for founders, and a lot of the folks that we deal with are mental capital type folks, like boutique folks.
Yeah.
When we think about scaling, we often think about 2x is, well, if I get 100 leads, how can I do 200? But how can I do?
Oh, that was a perfect frozen moment.
I'm from 100 lead. Oh man, sorry.
So, do 10x is better than 2x. How do I get 100 leads? You gotta pick up right there.
So when we think about how do I do 100 leads, how do I get to 200 leads? We think about scaling ourselves. Well, how am I going to do 200 leads? But if you go from 100 leads to 1,000 leads, it's all, I can't take on 1,000 leads, right? So even just the mental shift of like, if you scaled that 10 times, it makes you think differently. It's no longer, I'm trying to scale myself. And honestly, that's really led us to I would call it our propelling question for 2025 and for our clients right now, which is, are you building a job or are you building a business?
I love it.
And if you think about scaling yourself, you're thinking about building a job. I'm actually trying to figure out, how do I work more, harder, and more?
Love that.
And building the business is, how do I build systems, structures, processes, frameworks, ways of understanding that allow me to elevate myself out of the function, right? So that is honestly what the 5 facets does. It's a combination of systems and behaviors to help you move out of the job version of leading a company into the business version of leading a company.
So with that final impact story, mic drop, we're going to end the episode there because Hannah and Dave have shown you, one, how to share an impact story, but two, how to do so in a non-salesy way. I don't know if you, I didn't feel like they were selling at all. I felt like they were sharing their experiences. And honestly, if you need someone to help you make order out of chaos, like Hannah told you, or elevate and delegate, you know who to call, right? And that is the whole game of monetizing your mental capital. It was a pleasure having you both on this episode. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us. As always, good to chat. Good questions. Got us thinking. It's good. Thank you.